The barometer was falling, and nobody would listen to the Omega who knew what it meant. Vera Ashford stood in her workshop within the mountain cave, surrounded by instruments that had cost her everything she owned, watching Mercury plummet through numbers that should not exist in October. The atmospheric pressure had dropped 8 millibars in 6 hours. The temperature was falling 3 degrees every 60 minutes, and the patterns on her screens matched exactly what her grandmother's journals had described. The Tri-State Killer, 1897. The winter that froze wolves mid-shift and killed 300 people in 4 days. It was happening again. Vera's fingers trembled as she entered the latest readings into her laptop, her Omega instincts screaming warnings that her conscious mind had learned to trust over 5 years of exile. The gift ran strong in her bloodline, passed down through generations of Ashford women who could sense wrongness in the air before disaster struck. Her grandmother Miriam had been the last recognized weather oracle before the modern pack structure had dismissed such things as superstition. Now Vera carried that burden alone. She was 29 years old and had spent the last 5 years building this sanctuary after the pack had rejected her, after they had stripped her of her position as the Valley's atmospheric researcher, after they had made it clear that an Omega's warnings were worth less than an Alpha's confidence. Her cave dwelling was carved into the living rock of Stormwatch Peak, 2 miles above the valley floor, where the town of Thornhaven sprawled in comfortable ignorance. The main chamber held her weather monitoring equipment, sophisticated instruments she had purchased with her inheritance after her parents died. Barometers, thermometers, hygrometers, and satellite data feeds that painted a picture of atmospheric chaos forming to the north. 3 storm systems converging, temperature gradients that defied meteorological models, and beneath it all, the subtle vibration in the stone that told her the mountain itself was afraid. Vera pulled on her heavy coat and made her way through the wooden cabin she had built within the natural cavern. The structure was small, but perfectly insulated, heated by geothermal vents she had tapped into after months of careful work. Storage rooms lined the cave walls, filled with supplies that had earned her the pack's mockery. Dried food, medical equipment, water filtration systems, and enough firewood to last through the worst winter imaginable. They called her paranoid, the crazy Omega who lived in a cave and predicted doomsdays that never came. But Vera remembered her grandmother's stories, remembered the accounts of the 1897 freeze, when wolves had tried to shift for warmth and found themselves trapped between forms as the cold locked their bodies in agonizing stasis. Remembered the survivors who spoke of temperatures so low that breath froze in the lungs and skin cracked like glass. She had tried to warn them. God, how she had tried. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sarah Blackwater, the only person in Thornhaven who still spoke to her with respect. Council meeting tonight, 7 p.m. They're discussing winter preparedness. Come try again? Vera stared at the message. War between hope and bitter experience. The last town council meeting had been 3 months ago. She had presented her atmospheric data, shown them the historical records, explained the cyclical patterns that suggested a catastrophic freeze was overdue. Alpha Ronan Frost, the pack's primary enforcer, had laughed in her face. Omegas don't understand weather systems, he had said, his voice carrying the casual dismissal that pack hierarchy granted him. You understand nesting and nurturing. Leave the science to those with the capacity for it. The room had erupted in laughter. Even the betas had joined in, eager to align themselves with Alpha authority. Only Sarah, a beta with Native American heritage who remembered the old ways, had met Vera's eyes with sympathy. Vera typed back, "What's the point? They've made it clear what they think of Omega analysis." Sarah's response came immediately. "Please, I have a bad feeling. If you're right about this storm, people will die. Give them one more chance." Vera looked around her cave sanctuary. She had food for 3 months, water from a natural spring, heat that would last indefinitely. She could survive whatever was coming. But the families in the valley, the children, the elderly who could not maintain their wolf forms in extreme cold, they would not survive without preparation. Her grandmother's journal lay open on the workbench, the entry from January 1897 written in shaking handwriting. "I warned them. I begged them to consolidate into defensible shelters. But the Alphas believed their strength would be enough. They were wrong. So many dead. So many frozen mid-shift, their bodies locked in grotesque hybrid forms, their wolves unable to complete the transformation that might have saved them. The cold does not care about hierarchy. The winter respects no rank. And I, the Omega they ignored, am left to bury them and bear witness to their pride. Vera closed the journal carefully and checked her appearance in the small mirror by the door. She looked tired, her dark hair pulled back in a practical braid, her gray eyes shadowed by too many sleepless nights monitoring storm patterns. At 29, she should have been settled with a mate, perhaps carrying her first child, integrated into pack life in the way Omegas were expected to be. Instead, she lived alone on a mountain, spoke to instruments more than people, and carried knowledge that no one wanted to hear. She texted Sarah back, "I'll come, but this is the last time. If they dismiss me again, I'm done trying to save people who don't want to be saved." The drive down to Thornhaven took 30 minutes on the winding mountain road. Vera's old Jeep handled the terrain well, though she knew these roads would be impassable within days once the snow started. She had supplies to last her through spring if necessary. The question was whether anyone else would. Thornhaven spread across the valley like something from a postcard. Population 400, mostly shifters from old bloodlines who had lived in these mountains for generations. The pack structure was traditional, hierarchical, and deeply resistant to change. Alphas led, betas supported, Omegas nurtured and submitted. Vera had never been good at submission. The community center parking lot was full when she arrived. Through the windows, she could see the meeting already in progress. Elder Gareth Stone presided from the head table, his 78 years giving him authority that even the strongest alphas respected. Beside him sat Alpha Ronan Frost, massive and confident, his wolf close to the surface in the way powerful alphas carried themselves. Vera took a breath, steadying her Omega instincts that wanted to defer, to lower her eyes, to accept whatever the alphas decided. Those instincts had been bred into her kind over centuries. But her grandmother had taught her that wisdom was worth more than obedience, especially when lives were at stake. She walked into the meeting with her head high and her data tablet clutched in both hands. The conversations died as she entered. 40 pairs of eyes turned toward her, most with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. She felt the weight of pack judgment, the subtle press of alpha dominance trying to make her lower her gaze. She met their eyes steadily and walked to the front of the room. Elder Gareth raised an eyebrow. "Miss Ashford, we weren't expecting you." Sarah Blackwater said I should present my findings one more time. There's a storm system forming that matches historical patterns for catastrophic winter events. "We've heard your predictions before," Ronan Frost said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been told no. "Every year you predict disaster. Every year winter comes and goes normally. At what point do we stop listening to false alarms?" Vera placed her tablet on the table, pulling up the satellite imagery. "This is different. 3 separate systems are converging from the north. The atmospheric pressure is dropping at a rate I've never seen in 5 years of monitoring. The temperature gradient suggests we could see minus 50-degree conditions within 72 hours. That's impossible," said Dr. Lydia Ravens, the pack's primary healer. "The Weather Service hasn't issued anything beyond normal winter storm warnings." "The Weather Service isn't looking at the right indicators. They're using standard models that don't account for the cyclical patterns that appear every 127 years. Laughter rippled through the room. Even Sarah looked uncomfortable, caught between supporting Vera and maintaining her own standing in the pack. "Every 127 years, Ronan repeated, his tone mocking. "That's very specific. Tell me, Omega, did your grandmother's ghost whisper that number to you?" "My grandmother survived the 1897 freeze. She documented everything. The atmospheric conditions, the temperature patterns, the way the cold affected shifter physiology. I have her journals, I have historical weather data, and I have current readings that show we are heading into the exact same scenario." Elder Gareth leaned forward, his expression more thoughtful than mocking. "Your grandmother Miriam was respected in her time, but that was before modern meteorology, before we understood atmospheric science. Surely you're not suggesting we make emergency preparations based on century-old folklore. I'm suggesting we prepare for a worst-case scenario because the data supports it. Consolidate people into the most defensible buildings. Stock emergency supplies. Make sure backup heating systems are functional. And most critically, educate everyone about the dangers of shifting in extreme cold." "Why would shifting be dangerous?" A young alpha named Cade Blackridge stood up, his posture aggressive. "Our wolves are designed for cold weather. If anything, shift would protect us." Vera had known Cade in high school, back before pack hierarchy had hardened into their adult roles. He had been kind once, curious about her weather observations, willing to listen when others dismissed her. Then he had gone through his alpha emergence at 18, and everything had changed. The boy who had walked her home from school became the man who looked through her like she was furniture. "Not in temperatures below -40, Vera said, keeping her voice level. "At that point, the shift becomes dangerous. Your wolf form generates more surface area, which means faster heat loss. If your core temperature drops during the transformation, you can get locked mid-shift. Your body neither fully human nor fully wolf, trapped in a hybrid state that's agonizing and often fatal." "That's absurd," Cade said. "I've shifted in below-zero weather dozens of times." "Below zero is not below -40. The physiology is completely different. My grandmother documented 12 cases in 1897 of shifters who died because they tried to shift for warmth and got frozen in the transformation. Their bodies couldn't complete the change and couldn't reverse it. They died in agony over the course of hours." The room had gone silent. Even the mockers seemed unsettled by the image Vera had painted. Then Elder Gareth cleared his throat. "Miss Ashford, I appreciate your concern, truly, but you're asking us to panic 400 people based on patterns you've identified in old journals and your own readings. The National Weather Service, the State Emergency Management Office, even the University Meteorology Department, none of them are predicting anything unusual. Why should we trust your analysis over theirs? Because I'm looking at different data. Because I'm considering factors that modern meteorology dismisses as irrelevant. Because my grandmother was right in 1897 and nobody listened to her either. 300 people died because the alphas believed their strength would be enough." Vera's voice had risen despite her efforts to stay calm. She felt her omega instincts screaming at her to back down, to submit, to stop challenging the pack hierarchy so directly. But the data was too clear. The danger was too real. "Are you calling me weak, Omega?" Ronan Frost had stood, his considerable presence filling the front of the room. His wolf was very close to the surface now, visible in the way his eyes had started to shift color, the way his shoulders had broadened slightly, a dominance display designed to make her submit. Vera forced herself to hold his gaze. "I'm saying that physical strength is irrelevant against weather that can kill you in minutes. I'm saying that pride is a poor defense against hypothermia. I'm saying that if you don't prepare, people will die." The silence stretched. She could feel the weight of pack dynamics pressing down on her, every instinct bred into her omega nature, demanding that she lower her eyes, that she apologize for challenging an alpha, that she accept her place in the hierarchy. She did not lower her eyes. Finally, Elder Gareth spoke. "Thank you for your presentation, Miss Ashford. The Council will take your concerns under advisement. You may go." It was a dismissal. Polite, but absolute. Vera gathered her tablet and walked out of the community center, feeling 40 pairs of eyes on her back. She heard the laughter start before she even reached the door. In the parking lot, she sat in her Jeep with shaking hands, adrenaline and frustration warring in her chest. She had done everything she could, presented the data, shown them the historical parallels, warned them about the specific dangers. They had laughed at her. Her phone buzzed. "Sarah, I'm sorry. I tried to support you, but Ronan shut me down. For what it's worth, I believe you. My grandmother told stories about the 1897 winter. They match your grandmother's journals. The cold that froze wolves mid-shift. The Wetiko that came with the deep freeze." Vera stared at that last word. Wetiko. Sarah had mentioned them before, the creatures from Blackfoot legend that appeared during extreme cold. Cannibalistic spirits born from despair and hunger. Vera had dismissed it as mythology, focusing on the meteorological and physiological dangers. But her grandmother's journal had mentioned them too. Strange things in the blizzard that looked like people but moved wrong. Voices calling from the storm in the tones of dead loved ones. Survivors who spoke of touching something in the snow and feeling their warmth drain away, as if the cold itself was alive and hungry. She typed back to Sarah. "Tell me about the Wetiko, everything your grandmother said." The response took several minutes, not over text. "Come to my house tomorrow morning. I'll show you what my grandmother left me. If this storm is really coming, you need to know what else might come with it." Vera drove back up the mountain as darkness fell, her Jeep's headlights cutting through the first wisps of snow that had started to fall. Too early, too heavy, too cold. The barometer in her cave showed the pressure had dropped another 3 millibars. She had perhaps 48 hours before it hit. That night, Vera couldn't sleep. She lay in her bunk and listened to the mountain. The subtle vibrations in the stone had intensified, a frequency below normal hearing that she felt in her bones. Her omega instincts, sharper than most, translated it into raw unease. The mountain was terrified. At 3 a.m., she gave up on sleep and returned to her monitoring station. The satellite imagery showed the three systems pulling together like fingers forming a fist. The leading edge would reach Thornhaven by tomorrow evening. The full force would hit 36 hours after that. Her laptop pinged with an email alert. The National Weather Service had finally updated their forecast. Winter storm warning upgraded to blizzard warning. Heavy snow expected. Temperatures dropping to -20. Winds 40 to 60 miles per hour. Travel not recommended after 6 p.m. tomorrow. -20. They were underestimating by at least 30 degrees. Vera grabbed her phone and composed a mass text to every contact she had in Thornhaven. Most of them never responded to her anymore, but she had to try. This is Vera Ashford. The storm coming is worse than official forecasts. Much worse. If you value your life, stock emergency supplies now. Do not rely on modern heating systems. They will fail. Do not shift in extreme cold. You can get frozen mid-transformation. Please take this seriously. This message could save your life. She sent it and immediately got bounce-backs from numbers that had blocked her. The few responses that came through ranged from annoyed to hostile. Stop spreading panic. Crazy Omega doomsday nonsense again. You need psychological help. Only one response was different, from a number she didn't recognize. Thank you for the warning. My kids are young and I'm a single mother. I don't have much, but I'm stocking what I can. Bless you for trying even when nobody listens. Vera stared at that message, feeling something tight in her chest loosen slightly. One person. One family that might survive because of her warning. It would have to be enough. At dawn, she made the drive to Sarah Blackwater's house on the edge of town. Sarah lived alone, her husband having died 5 years ago in a hunting accident. She was 58, a history teacher at the high school, and one of the few people who bridged the gap between traditional pack structure and the old ways her Blackfoot grandmother had taught her. Sarah's house was modest but comfortable, filled with Native American artwork and the smell of sage. She answered the door in jeans and a heavy sweater, her gray hair pulled back in a braid similar to Vera's. "Come in quickly, it's getting cold." Inside, Sarah had laid out several items on her kitchen table. Bundles of dried herbs, chunks of iron ore, leather pouches filled with salt, and a journal similar to Vera's grandmother's, but older, the leather cover worn nearly smooth. "My grandmother was a medicine woman," Sarah said, pouring coffee for both of them. She walked between the traditional world and the shifter world. She was present during the 1897 freeze. She documented everything, just like your grandmother Miriam did. Vera sat down, cradling the warm mug in both hands. "Tell me about the Whittico." Sarah opened the old journal, revealing pages covered in precise handwriting and detailed sketches. The drawings showed tall, emaciated figures with 2 long limbs and faces that were almost human but wrong in subtle ways. My grandmother called them the hungry spirits. They exist in a realm adjacent to ours, a place of eternal winter and endless hunger. They can't normally cross over. But when the cold gets deep enough, when the barrier between life and death thins, when human despair creates resonance, they can slip through. "That sounds like folklore," Vera said carefully. "So did your grandmother's warnings about frozen shifts. But those were real, weren't they?" Sarah turned the journal pages, showing more sketches. The Whittico feed on isolation and fear. They appear during blizzards when people are separated from their communities. They call to you in voices of loved ones who have died. They promise warmth, reunion, peace. All you have to do is step outside into the storm. And if you do, they drain your heat. Not your body temperature, your life heat. The warmth that makes you alive. My grandmother said it was like having your soul frozen. Your body becomes ice from the inside out. And if they kill you that way, if your death is from the Whittico's touch rather than natural hypothermia, you can become one of them. Vera set down her coffee, suddenly not thirsty. How many people died that way in 1897? My grandmother estimated 50, maybe more. In the chaos of the blizzard, it was hard to distinguish between deaths from cold and deaths from Whittico. But there were survivors who swore they saw the creatures, who heard their dead relatives calling from the snow, who watched neighbors walk out into the storm with peaceful smiles and never come back. How do you fight them? Sarah pointed to the items on the table. The old ways. Iron disrupts their essence, forces them to maintain physical form. Salt creates barriers they can't cross. Fire drives them back. And most importantly, human connection. They feed on isolation. Large groups that stay together, that support each other, that maintain hope, those groups survive. Vera picked up one of the iron chunks, feeling the weight of it. You believe this, that these things are real? Sarah met her eyes steadily. I believe my grandmother, just like you believe yours. And I believe that you're right about the storm, which means I need to prepare for what comes with it. Over the next hour, Sarah showed Vera the traditional protective methods. How to bless iron with prayers in the old language. How to create salt circles. How to recognize the signs of someone falling under the Wetiko's call before they walked into the storm. When Vera finally left, she carried bags of supplies that Sarah had pressed into her hands. Iron fragments, salt, dried herbs for burning, and a warning. If this is really the same pattern as 1897, the Wetiko will be drawn to places where people have gathered in fear and desperation. The emergency shelters will be targets. Your cave will be safe because you've been preparing with positive intention, not desperate panic. But Sarah hesitated. When people start dying, when the shelters fail, they're going to remember that you warned them. They're going to come to you. You need to decide now if you'll take them in. I've been stockpiling supplies for 5 years, Vera said quietly. I always knew this day would come. I'll take in whoever arrives, as many as the cave can hold. Sarah embraced her, a gesture of respect between equals that transcended pack hierarchy. You're a good Omega, Vera Ashford. Better than this pack deserves. Your grandmother would be proud. Vera drove back up the mountain as the first real snow began to fall. Not the light wisps from last night, but heavy wet flakes that spoke of the moisture being pulled from the converging systems. The temperature had dropped 10 degrees since morning. She spent the afternoon doing final preparations, checking her generator fuel levels, organizing the medical supplies Dr. Ravens had refused to stockpile at the community clinic, pulling out the extra sleeping bags and blankets she had acquired over the years. Her cave could comfortably hold 8 people, could fit 12 in an emergency. Beyond that, they would be crowded, but they would be alive and warm. At 4 p.m., her phone rang, an unknown number. Miss Ashford, this is Nathan Winters. You don't know me, but I got your text this morning. I'm the single father with young kids. I was wondering, I know this is a huge ask, but is there any chance we could shelter with you when the storm hits? I have 3 children, ages 5, 7, and 10. I can pay you, I can work, I can do whatever you need. I just need my kids to be safe. Vera closed her eyes, feeling the weight of responsibility settling over her shoulders. Mr. Winters, bring your family up as soon as you can. Don't wait for official evacuation orders. They won't come until it's too late. Do you have 4-wheel drive? Yes, ma'am. Good. The road will be passable for maybe another 6 hours. After that, you'd need a snowcat. Bring whatever supplies you can carry, but travel light. Focus on medications, important documents, and warm clothes. I have food and water. How much do I owe you? Nothing. Just get here safely. After she hung up, Vera stood at her cave entrance watching the valley below. Lights were coming on in houses as evening approached. Normal life continuing, people making dinner and helping children with homework and thinking about what to watch on television. None of them knew that this was possibly their last normal evening for a very long time. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from a number she did recognize. Cade Blackridge. I owe you an apology for the meeting last night. Ronan was out of line. For what it's worth, some of us younger alphas think you might be right. I've been watching the weather reports and they're getting worse every hour. If you're taking people in, I'd like to help with evacuations tomorrow. I have a snowmobile and cold weather gear. Just tell me what you need. Vera stared at the message, surprised. Cade had been one of her harshest critics over the years, always quick to side with Ronan in dismissing her warnings. This felt like either genuine change or a trap. She decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. If you mean that, spread the word quietly. Anyone who wants shelter should head to my cave before noon tomorrow. After that, the roads will be too dangerous. And Cade, if Ronan tries to stop people from evacuating, remember that you have free will. You don't have to follow alpha orders that will get people killed. His response was immediate. I remember, and thank you, for not giving up on us even when we didn't deserve it. At 9 p.m., the Winters family arrived. Nathan was a beta in his early 30s, exhausted looking but determined. His 3 children were bundled in winter coats, their eyes wide as they took in the cave dwelling. The oldest, a girl named Lucy, clutched a worn, stuffed rabbit. Vera showed them to the sleeping area she had prepared, helped them settle in, and made hot chocolate for the children. Lucy watched her with solemn eyes. "Are we going to die?" "No," Vera said firmly. "You're going to be safe here. This cave has been standing for thousands of years. A storm can't touch us in here. My teacher said you're crazy, that you make up stories to scare people." "Your teacher is wrong. I'm not crazy. I'm just paying attention when others won't." Lucy considered this, then nodded. "I think you're brave. It's scary to tell the truth when nobody wants to hear it." "Out of the mouths of children," Nathan said softly. "Thank you, Miss Ashford, for everything." That night, as the Winters family slept in the warmth and safety of the cave, Vera stood watch at her instruments. The barometer continued its relentless fall. The temperature was now 5 degrees and dropping. The snow was falling so heavily that visibility was measured in feet rather than yards. And on her weather radio, she heard the first emergency broadcasts. "This is the National Weather Service with an upgraded warning. Blizzard conditions expected to intensify through tomorrow. Temperatures now forecast to reach -35 with wind chills approaching -70. This is now considered a life-threatening situation. All residents are advised to seek shelter immediately. Do not travel unless absolutely necessary." Still wrong, still underestimating, but at least they were starting to understand the danger. Vera's phone buzzed constantly through the night. People who had blocked her were suddenly unblocking and asking questions. Where should they go? What should they bring? How bad was it really going to get? She answered every message with the same information. Consolidate into the strongest buildings. The high school had the best backup systems. The community center was acceptable. Do not stay in individual homes. Do not attempt to tough it out alone. Do not shift unless absolutely necessary, and even then, only if the temperature was above -20. At 2 a.m., she got a message from Elder Gareth Stone himself. "Miss Ashford, the council is implementing emergency protocols. We're opening the high school and community center as shelters at 6 a.m. Would you be willing to serve as an advisor? Your expertise may be needed." Vera stared at the message, feeling a complex mix of vindication and sorrow. She had been right. They finally believed her. But it was so late, perhaps too late for many. "I'll help however I can. But Elder, you need to know this is worse than the official forecasts. We're looking at -50 or colder. And there's something else, something the forecasts won't mention. Ask Sarah Blackwater about her grandmother's accounts from 1897, about the Whittico." She hit send before she could second-guess herself. The response took 10 minutes. "I remember those stories. My grandfather survived the 1897 freeze. He never spoke of it directly, but he left journals. I thought they were just trauma-induced nightmares. You're saying they were real?" "I'm saying we should prepare for the possibility. Iron, salt, fire, and staying together. Those are our defenses." "Understood. Come to the high school at first light. We need you." Vera set down her phone and looked at the sleeping Winters family. Lucy was curled up with her stuffed rabbit, peaceful and safe. Nathan snored softly, exhausted from the stress of the day. One family saved. But there were 400 people in Thornhaven, and most of them were only just now beginning to understand the danger they were in. The barometer hit 28.5 and continued to fall. Outside, the wind was starting to howl. The storm was coming, and with it perhaps something worse. Vera pulled her grandmother's journal close and read the final entry by candlelight. "To whoever inherits my gift, my burden, my oracle sight, when the convergence comes again, and it will come, you will not be believed. You will be mocked and dismissed and told you are mad. Stand firm anyway. Prepare anyway. Save who you can save. The mountain remembers, the winter remembers, and the Whittico remember. They are patient. They wait in the spaces between cold and colder, between alive and dead. They will come with the deep freeze, but remember this, they feed on isolation and despair. Where there is community and hope, they cannot thrive. Be the light in the darkness. Be the warmth in the cold. Be the Omega who stands when others fall. That is your duty. That is your gift. That is your burden. May you bear it better than I did. May you save more than I saved. May the mountain keep you." Vera closed the journal and looked out at the storm gathering strength beyond her cave entrance. "I will bear it, grandmother. I will stand. I will save them, even if they don't deserve it. Even if they never thank me, I will stand. Because that's what oracles do. The wind howled louder, and somewhere in its voice, Vera thought she heard something else. Not just weather patterns and atmospheric pressure, but something older, something patient, something hungry. The Witiko were waking, and the long winter was about to begin. Dawn came gray and bitter, the sky pressing down like a ceiling of lead. Vera Ashford stood at the cave entrance, watching the valley disappear beneath falling snow. In 6 hours, visibility had dropped to less than 20 feet. The temperature had plummeted to -5 degrees and was falling 3 degrees every hour. But what worried her most was the barometer, 27.9 millibars. She had never seen pressure that low. According to her grandmother's journals, the 1897 storm had bottomed out at 28.2. They were already past that threshold, and the main system hadn't even arrived yet. Behind her in the cave, Nathan Winters was making breakfast for his children. The smell of oatmeal and coffee filled the warm space, incongruous against the deadly cold gathering outside. Lucy, the 10-year-old, sat at Vera's workstation, fascinated by the weather instruments. "What does that one measure?" She pointed to the anemometer. "Wind speed. Right now it's 42 miles per hour. By tonight it could be over 100. Lucy's eyes widened. "That's faster than cars on the highway. Much faster. And cold enough that exposed skin freezes in under 2 minutes. But we're safe in here, right?" Vera knelt down to the girl's level, meeting those serious young eyes. "Yes, we're safe in here. This cave has protected people for thousands of years. The mountain is our shelter." A knock on the cave's outer door made them both turn. Nathan moved immediately to his children, protective instincts flaring. Vera grabbed the iron poker from beside the wood stove, old habits from Sarah's warnings about the Witiko making her cautious even in daylight. Through the reinforced door's small window, she saw Cade Blackridge, covered in snow, his snowmobile idling behind him. She opened the door quickly, letting him inside and sealing out the wind that tried to follow. Cade shed his outer layers, revealing the powerful alpha build beneath. Even here, even now, Vera felt her Omega instincts react to his presence. The urge to defer, to lower her eyes, to submit to his authority. She crushed those instincts with practiced will. "The high school is filling up," Cade said without preamble. "Elder Gareth asked me to bring you down. They need your expertise on cold weather survival protocols." "How many people?" "About 60 so far. But more are coming in every hour as they realize how bad this is getting. Community Center has another 30. The rest are still in their homes." Vera checked her instruments again. The leading edge of the main system was 6 hours out. After that, travel would be lethal. Anyone who isn't in shelter by 1 p.m. is going to die. The roads will be impassable. The cold will be unsurvivable. We need to do one final evacuation sweep. I brought the snowmobile for that. He hesitated. "I know I don't have the right to ask after how I've treated you, but will you help me? You know this valley better than anyone. You know who lives where, who might need help." Vera looked at Nathan and his children, safe and warm in her cave. She had done her duty by them. She could stay here, wait out the storm, survive while the rest of Thornhaven faced the consequences of ignoring her warnings. But Lucy was watching her with those solemn eyes, and Vera heard her grandmother's voice in her memory. "Be the light in the darkness. Be the warmth in the cold. I'll help. But we do this my way. No alpha posturing. No dismissing my instructions. If I say we turn back, we turn back. Agreed?" "Agreed." She geared up in her cold weather equipment, far superior to the standard winter clothes most of the pack owned. Military-grade Arctic suit, thermal layers, face mask, goggles. She also grabbed the bag of iron fragments and salt that Sarah had given her. Cade noticed. "What's that for?" "Insurance." They left Nathan in charge of the cave with strict instructions to keep the door barred and to not let anyone leave no matter what they heard outside. Then Vera climbed onto the back of Cade's snowmobile, wrapping her arms around his waist as they shot out into the storm. The world had transformed into white chaos. Snow fell so heavily it was like driving through a solid curtain. The wind buffeted them constantly, trying to knock them off course. Vera's Omega senses screamed warnings, feeling wrongness in the air that went beyond meteorological danger. Something was watching them from the white. They made 3 stops in the outlying areas. The first was the Morrison family, elderly shifters who had been too proud to seek shelter. Vera had to physically drag Mrs. Morrison out of her home while Cade carried Mr. Morrison, who had already lost feeling in his feet. The couple's protests died when they saw the thermometer reading, -20 and still dropping. The second stop was a young beta mother with twin infants. She had wanted to ride it out, certain her maternal wolf would protect her babies. Vera showed her the journal entry about frozen shifts, about mothers who had tried to shift to provide warmth and instead died trapped between forms while their children froze beside them. The woman came without further argument. The third stop was where everything went wrong. The house belonged to Henrik Larsson, 82 years old, living alone since his mate had died. They found him in his living room, frozen solid in his recliner. His eyes were open. His mouth was stretched in a smile that looked almost peaceful. And there were no tracks leading to or from the house in the fresh snow. Cade checked for a pulse anyway, his alpha strength meaningless against death. He's been dead for hours, since before the snow started falling this heavy. Vera examined the body more closely, fighting her revulsion. Henrik's fingers were blue, his skin waxy. But what disturbed her most was his expression. People who died from hypothermia usually looked anguished. This looked like he had welcomed it. Then she noticed the window. It was cracked open, just an inch. In weather like this, that was suicide. The cold would have poured in, dropping the indoor temperature rapidly. She moved to close it and stopped. On the windowsill, perfectly preserved in frost, was a handprint, far too large to be Henrik's. The fingers were elongated, the proportions wrong, and the frost around it was darker than it should be, almost gray. "Cade, we need to leave now." "What is it?" She grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the door. "That's not normal frostbite. That's something else, something that came in through the window." They were halfway back to the snowmobile when Vera heard it. A voice, distant and distorted, calling from somewhere in the storm. "Cade, wait, don't leave. I'm cold, so cold." It was using a woman's voice, young, pleading, desperate. Cade stopped, his head turning toward the sound. "That's Lisa, my girlfriend. She's supposed to be at the high school. Why would she be out here?" Vera grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. "That's not Lisa. It's using her voice, but it's not her. Do not go toward it. Do not respond to it. That's the Wetiko. That's how they hunt." His eyes had started to glaze, the alpha hardwired to protect, to respond to distress. "But she needs help. She's not real. Cade, look at me. Use your wolf senses. Really smell the air. Does that scent like a living person or something else?" He inhaled deeply, his wolf rising enough to enhance his senses. Then his expression changed, revulsion and fear mixing. "That's not Lisa. That's not anything alive. God, what is that smell?" "Death and hunger and winter. Now get on the snowmobile before it gets closer." They raced back toward town, the voice following them for a terrifying minute before fading into the storm. Vera held on to Cade tightly, feeling his body shake not from cold, but from the realization of how close he had come to walking into the white. At the high school, they found controlled chaos. The gymnasium had been converted into a mass shelter, sleeping bags and blankets spread across the floor. A propane heater ran in each corner, but Vera could already feel that the heating was inadequate. The temperature inside was maybe 50 degrees. Elder Gareth Stone met them at the door, his aged face grave. "Thank God. We're getting reports of fatalities already. Old man Henrik Larsson never answered our calls, and the Fletcher family's home collapsed under snow weight. The parents made it out, but the 3 children were trapped inside. By the time we dug them out, it was too late." Vera felt the news like a physical blow. 3 children dead. Kids she had probably seen around town, playing in the park, riding bikes. Dead because the pack had not believed her warnings until too late. "How many people are here now?" 73, including the ones you just brought in. Community Center has 42, and we estimate another 60 scattered in their homes. We tried to reach them all, but communication is breaking down. Cell towers are failing from ice weight. "What about the backup generator?" "Running, but fuel won't last more than 2 days at this rate." Vera pulled out her data tablet, showing him the storm models. "This is going to last minimum 4 days, possibly 5. Your fuel will run out halfway through. After that, you're relying on propane heaters, which will also run out. And Elder, there's something else you need to know." She told him about Henrik Larsson, about the handprint on the windowsill, about the voice that had called to Cade using his girlfriend's voice. Gareth listened, his expression growing more drawn. "So the old stories are true. The Wetiko are real. I didn't believe it either until I saw the evidence. We need to implement Sarah Blackwater's protective protocols. Iron around the doors and windows, salt lines at every entrance, and most critically, no one goes outside alone. No one responds to voices calling from the storm no matter how familiar they sound. I'll make the announcement, But Vera, we're going to need more than folk remedies. We need a plan to survive 4 days with limited heat and no way to resupply. My cave can take maybe 15 more people maximum. Anyone with medical issues, young children, pregnant women, they should come to me. The cave has geothermal heating that will last indefinitely. That's generous considering how this town has treated you. Vera met his eyes steadily. I didn't prepare for 5 years just to let people die out of spite. I'm an Omega. We protect our pack even when our pack doesn't deserve it. The afternoon devolved into organized crisis management. Vera helped establish rationing protocols for food and fuel. She taught the betas how to create insulated sleeping areas using blankets and tarps to trap body heat. She went through the crowd identifying those most at risk from the cold. That was how she ended up face-to-face with Alpha Ronan Frost. He stood at the center of a group of young alphas, his presence dominating the space. When he saw Vera, his expression twisted into something between anger and reluctant respect. The crazy Omega was right after all. Who would have thought? Vera kept her voice level. I need to evaluate everyone for cold vulnerability. That includes you and your alphas. We don't need evaluation. We're alphas. We can handle cold better than any beta or Omega. Can you handle frostbite? Can you handle hypothermia? Can you handle being trapped mid-shift when your wolf tries to transform in minus 50-degree conditions? The group had gone silent. Ronan's dominance flared, an alpha trying to cow an Omega into submission. Vera did not submit. I have medical training and 5 years of cold weather research. You have pride and outdated ideas about hierarchy. Check your ego or check your extremities when they start turning black from frostbite. Your choice. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then, surprisingly, Ronan laughed. You've got steel in you, Omega. I'll give you that. Fine. Evaluate us. But if you're wrong about any of this, we're going to have words. If I'm wrong, we'll all be dead, so the conversation will be moot. She worked through the evening, checking people for early signs of hypothermia and frostbite, teaching them the warning signs, distributing the limited medical supplies they had. Cade stayed near her, helping move people and supplies, deferring to her expertise in a way that surprised many of the pack members. During a brief break, he approached her quietly. I owe you an apology, a real one. For years I dismissed you because you're an Omega and I'm an Alpha, and I believed that meant I was automatically smarter, stronger, more capable. I was wrong. You're the most capable person in this room. Thank you. But I need more than an apology, Cade. I need you to help me change how this pack thinks. When we survive this, and we will survive this, people are going to want to go back to normal. Back to hierarchy and dismissing Omega insight. We can't let that happen. How do we stop it? By proving that strength isn't just physical. By showing that preparation and wisdom have value. By making sure the children growing up after this learn that every pack member has gifts worth listening to. He considered this, then nodded. I'll help. I'll stand with you, even against Ronan if necessary. Be careful making promises you might have to keep. I mean it. Lisa's here, did you know that? She's been watching us, watching how I defer to your expertise. She asked me why an Alpha would take orders from an Omega. You know what I told her? What? That you're not giving orders. You're giving wisdom. And only a fool refuses wisdom because of the source. Before Vera could respond, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then died completely. Emergency lighting kicked in, battery-powered fixtures that cast harsh shadows. The propane heaters continued to run, but without the building's main heating system, the temperature would start dropping immediately. Elder Gareth's voice called out, steady despite the crisis. Everyone remain calm. The generator tripped. We're resetting it now. But 30 minutes later, the lights were still out. The generator wouldn't restart, and the temperature in the gymnasium had already dropped from 50 degrees to 45. Vera checked her instruments by flashlight. Minus 38 outside, minus 42 with wind chill, and the main system is 3 hours out. This is bad, Cade said quietly. This is catastrophic. Without the generator, we have maybe 12 hours before hypothermia starts claiming lives. The propane heaters can't heat this whole space adequately. What do we do? Vera looked around at the 73 people packed into the gymnasium, families huddled together, the elderly wrapped in every available blanket, children who should have been in school, playing, safe. Instead, they were here, facing a night that would test every survival strategy she had prepared. We consolidate. Move everyone into the smallest defensible space we can. Use body heat. Create barriers with tarps and blankets. Ration the propane to make it last as long as possible. And pray the main system passes faster than my models predict. And if it doesn't, Then we start moving the most vulnerable to my cave. But in this cold, transport will be almost impossible. We'll lose people just trying to evacuate them." Cade's jaw set, determination replacing fear. "Then we make sure it doesn't come to that. Tell me what you need." They worked through the evening, reorganizing the shelter into something more survivable. Vera had them construct an inner shelter within the gymnasium using bleachers and tarps, creating a smaller space that would be easier to heat. The strongest alphas and betas took positions on the outside, using their greater body heat to insulate the more vulnerable people in the center. It was pack structure, not based on dominance, but on practical survival. And it worked. By midnight, they had stabilized the situation. The temperature inside the inner shelter was holding at 40 degrees. Not comfortable, but not immediately deadly. The propane was rationed carefully. Food and water were distributed with the precision of a military operation. And at the entrance, Cade and 2 other young alphas stood watch with iron rods and salt, guarding against threats both natural and supernatural. Vera allowed herself to sit for the first time in 18 hours, her back against the gymnasium wall, exhaustion making her bones ache. Sarah Blackwater settled beside her, wrapped in blankets. "You've done well, Oracle. Your grandmother would be proud. We've saved 73 people, but there are still over 60 unaccounted for, scattered in their homes or in the community center or God knows where. We won't know how many survived until the storm passes. You can't save everyone. You can only save the ones who come to you. I should have tried harder, should have made them listen." Sarah's laugh was soft, but not unkind. "You can't make alphas listen when their pride is louder than your warnings. Some lessons have to be learned in blood and ice. The question is whether they'll remember the lesson after the crisis passes." Movement at the entrance drew their attention. One of the watching alphas called out, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Something's out there. Multiple somethings. They're circling the building." Vera grabbed her flashlight and moved to the door, Cade flanking her immediately. Through the narrow windows, she could see shapes moving in the snow, tall figures that glided rather than walked. Too many to count. The Wetiko had found them. As if sensing their attention, one of the creatures moved closer to the window. Its face was almost human but wrong, stretched and emaciated with eyes like black ice. It opened its mouth and a voice came out. Vera Ashford. It's me, it's your grandmother. I'm so cold. Please let me in, please." The voice was perfect. The tone, the inflection, exactly as Vera remembered from her childhood. For a moment, her heart stopped, her Omega instincts screaming to obey, to help, to protect her grandmother. Then she remembered. Her grandmother was dead, had been dead for 3 years. "That's not her," she said firmly, as much to herself as to the others. "It's using her voice, but it's not her. Please, Vera, I'm so cold, so alone. Don't you love me anymore?" Tears stung her eyes, but she forced them back. "I loved you. I still love you. But you're at peace now. You're warm and safe and beyond pain. That thing wearing your voice is a lie." The Wetiko tilted its head, studying her. Then its expression changed, morphing into something alien and hungry. The voice that came next was not her grandmother's, but something older, colder, inhuman. "You cannot keep us out forever, Oracle. We are patient, we are hunger, and we will feed." Then it glided away into the storm, the other shapes following. Vera turned to find the entire shelter watching her. 73 pairs of eyes seeing an Omega stand defiant against a monster that would have broken most alphas. Cade spoke first, his voice carrying across the quiet space. "That is why we listen to her. Not because she's an Oracle or an Omega or any label we've put on her. We listen because she has the courage to face what we can barely comprehend, and more importantly, she has the knowledge to keep us alive." Heads nodded. Even Ronan Frost, for once, looked grudgingly impressed. Vera felt the shift in pack dynamics, subtle but real. She was no longer the crazy Omega to be mocked. She was the expert to be respected, the leader to be followed. She had not sought this authority, but she would use it to save lives. For the rest of the night, the Wetiko circled, scratching at windows, calling in voices of dead loved ones, testing every entrance for weakness. But the iron and salt held. The pack stayed together, the light stayed burning. And when dawn finally came, gray and bitter but dawn nonetheless, 73 people were still alive. Vera checked her instruments as the shelter slowly woke around her. Temperature -52 degrees, barometric pressure 27.3, wind speed 97 miles per hour. The main system had arrived. Day 2 of 5 was beginning, and they had only just begun to fight. The third dawn brought a silence more terrifying than any storm. Vera Ashford woke to absolute quiet, her omega senses screaming warnings before her conscious mind fully engaged. She bolted upright in the makeshift sleeping area, reaching for her instruments by pure instinct. The barometer had stopped falling. 27.1 millibars, holding steady for the first time in 4 days. Outside the high school's reinforced windows, she could see why. The wind had died completely. The snow had stopped falling. The sky was a pale, sickly gray that looked more like a ceiling than atmosphere. They were in the eye. Sarah Blackwater appeared beside her, moving with the quiet grace of someone who had not truly slept. "How long do we have?" Vera pulled up her weather models, running calculations with numb fingers. 6 hours. Maybe 8. Then the backside of the system hits and it gets worse. Worse than -52? The models suggest -60, possibly lower. And Sarah, look at this. She showed the older woman her satellite feed. The storm system had stalled directly over Thornhaven Valley. The 3 convergent systems had locked together, creating a stable vortex that showed no signs of dissipating. It's not moving. According to every meteorological principle I know, this system should be tracking east by now. But it's just sitting here, feeding on itself. My grandmother's journal mentioned this. She called it the hungry storm. She said it wasn't truly weather anymore. It was a door. A door to what? The place where the Wetiko come from, the realm of eternal winter. And according to the old stories, doors that open must be closed. Otherwise, they stay open forever. Vera felt ice in her stomach that had nothing to do with the temperature. How do we close it? Sarah pulled out her grandmother's journal, turning to pages marked with strips of leather. The old way requires 3 things: a blood sacrifice at the convergence point, iron blessed by those who remember the ancient words, and an oracle willing to stand between the worlds and seal the breach with their own life force. That sounds like dying. Not dying. Giving. My grandmother said it would drain years from the oracle's life. How many years depends on how strong the oracle is, how deep their gift runs. Before Vera could respond, shouting erupted from the main shelter. She grabbed her medical kit and ran toward the commotion. In the gymnasium center, one of the elderly pack members had collapsed. Mrs. Chen, 78 years old, her breathing shallow and irregular. Dr. Lydia Ravens was already there, checking vitals. Hypothermia. Advanced stage. Her core temperature is 86 degrees. We need to warm her immediately. The propane heaters were already at maximum. The inner shelter was as warm as they could make it, and Mrs. Chen was fading anyway. Vera knelt beside the old woman, taking her hand. Mrs. Chen's skin was like ice, her pulse thready and weak. This was how the cold killed, stealing warmth so gradually that you didn't realize you were dying until it was too late. "Can you shift?" Vera asked gently. "Your wolf might generate enough body heat to stabilize you." Mrs. Chen's eyes focused with difficulty. "Tried, last night, couldn't complete it. Got stuck. Hurt so much. Had to force myself back to human. Can't risk it again. Then we warm you the old way. Body heat, blankets, hot liquids." They worked on her for an hour. Nathan Winters donated his sleeping bag. Cade and 2 other alphas took turns lying beside her, sharing their greater body heat. They forced warm broth between her lips, drop by drop. It was not enough. Mrs. Chen died at 9:47 a.m., her hand still clasped in Vera's. The shelter fell silent as Dr. Ravens called time of death. 73 people had made it through the first 2 nights. Now they were 72. And they still had 2 more nights to survive. Elder Gareth Stone pulled Vera aside after they had moved Mrs. Chen's body to the cold storage area. The community center called on the radio. They've lost 6 people. Hypothermia, heart attacks from stress, and 1 man who walked outside after hearing his dead wife's voice. They're down to 36 survivors, and their fuel is almost gone. "Can we evacuate them here?" "Not in these conditions. The eye won't last long enough to safely move 36 people 2 miles through the snow. And we don't have room or resources for them anyway." "Then what do we do?" "Send them to my cave. It's closer to them, and I have the geothermal heating. But Elder, we need to solve the bigger problem. This storm isn't going to break on its own. We need to close the door." "You believe Sarah's grandmother's stories about sealing the breach?" "I believe in data. And my data says this storm is behaving in ways that violate everything we know about atmospheric science. So yes, I believe we need to try the old way." "What does the old way require?" Vera told him. "The sacrifice, the iron, the oracle standing between worlds." When she finished, Gareth was quiet for a long moment. "You're talking about volunteering to have years of your life drained away. I'm talking about being an oracle. This is what we do. We stand watch. We pay the price. We close the doors so others don't have to face what's on the other side. You're 29 years old. You should have 50 years ahead of you, maybe more. And if I don't do this, nobody will have any years ahead of them. The storm will stay locked over the valley. We'll run out of fuel and food. The cold will pick us off one by one, and the Wetiko will feed on our despair until there's nothing left but frozen corpses and hungry spirits. What do you need from me? Help evacuating the community center survivors to my cave. Help spreading word about what we're attempting. And help convincing the Alphas that an Omega's sacrifice is worth respecting rather than dismissing. Gareth gripped her shoulder, a gesture of profound respect that transcended pack hierarchy. I was wrong about you, Vera Ashford. We were all wrong. You are not the weakest among us. You are the strongest. The next 2 hours were controlled chaos. Cade volunteered to lead the evacuation of the community center, taking 4 strong Alphas with him on snowmobiles. They would guide the survivors to Vera's cave, where Nathan Winters was already sheltering with his children. Meanwhile, Vera and Sarah prepared for the ritual. The convergence point, according to Sarah's grandmother's journal, was on the peak of Stormwatch Mountain, the highest point in the valley where the 3 storm systems met overhead, where the door between worlds was weakest, where an oracle would have to stand and close it. Sarah spent hours blessing iron stakes with prayers in the old language. Vera memorized the ritual words, ancient syllables that felt strange on her tongue. They gathered supplies, flares for light, rope for safety, and Sarah's grandmother's medicine bundle for spiritual protection. At 2 p.m., Cade returned from the community center evacuation. He looked exhausted but triumphant. Got all 36 to your cave. Nathan's organizing them. Place is crowded, but everyone's warm and safe. Any casualties during transport? None, but it was close. The eye is weakening. Wind is picking up again. If we had waited another hour, we would have lost people. Then we need to move now, before the backside of the system hits. Cade looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw fear in his alpha eyes. Vera, what you're planning? Sarah told me. You can't do this. There has to be another way. There isn't. You know there isn't. The storm won't break naturally. Someone has to close the door. Then let me do it. I am an alpha. I'm strong. I can withstand whatever the ritual requires. The ritual requires an oracle, someone with the gift to sense the breach and the will to seal it. That's not about physical strength, Cade. That's about something else. You could die. I could. Or I could lose 20 years. Or 30. Or I could walk away unchanged. The journal isn't specific about the cost, but what I know for certain is that if I don't try, everyone dies, including you, including those children in my cave, including every person in this valley who trusted me when I said I would keep them safe. Cade was silent for a moment. Then he pulled her into an embrace, his alpha warmth surrounding her, his wolf singing to her omega in ways that had nothing to do with hierarchy and everything to do with genuine connection. When this is over, he said quietly, when you've saved us all and you're standing in the ruins of this storm, I want to take you to dinner. I want to court you properly. I want to show you that not all alphas are like Ronan, that some of us can see past labels to the person underneath. Vera pulled back, surprised. You want to court me? After years of dismissing me? I want to spend whatever time we have making up for being an idiot. If you'll let me. Despite everything, despite the storm and the dying and the fear, Vera smiled. Ask me again when I get back. The climb to the summit took 4 hours. Vera, Sarah, and Cade roped together for safety, pushing through snow that was 15 feet deep in places. The wind had picked up again, howling with renewed fury as the eye collapsed. By the time they reached the convergence point, the conditions were lethal, minus 64 degrees, wind gusts over 120 miles per hour, visibility measured in inches, and the sky above them was wrong. The 3 storm systems were visible as distinct vortexes, spinning independently but locked together. Where they met overhead, the clouds had a strange quality, almost translucent, and through that transparency, Vera could see something else, another sky, darker, colder, more stars than should be visible, each one crystalline and sharp and wrong. The door between worlds. Sarah planted the blessed iron stakes in a circle around the convergence point, marking the ritual space. Cade stood watch at the circle's edge, his wolf close to the surface, ready to fight anything that tried to interfere. Vera stood at the center, feeling the breach above her like pressure against her omega senses. The wrongness was overwhelming, making her wolf whimper in terror, making every instinct scream to run. She did not run. She began the ritual words, syllables that had been passed down through generations of oracles. The language was older than the pack structures, older than the written records, ancient words that resonated with something primal in the mountain itself. As she spoke, the iron stakes began to glow with a dull red light. The wind increased, screaming like something alive. And from the breach overhead, shapes began to descend. Wetiko, dozens of them, hundreds, an army of hungry spirits pouring through the door that had been opened by the convergence. Cade moved to intercept them. His wolf fully manifested now, a massive creature of fur and fury that stood between Vera and the monsters. Sarah joined him, iron knife in hand, chanting protective prayers in Blackfoot. But there were too many. For every Wetiko they drove back, 3 more descended. Vera raised her voice, pushing more power into the ritual words. She felt something shift inside her, her oracle gift activating fully for the first time. The gift that had always been there but never fully awakened. She could see the breach now, really see it. Not just the visible manifestation in the clouds, but the dimensional wound itself. A tear in reality where the barrier between living world and winter realm had been ripped open. And she understood what the ritual required. Not just words, not just will, but life force. Years of her life, converted into energy, used to seal the breach and restore the barrier. How many years? She had no way to know until she committed. She thought about Nathan Winters and his 3 children, safe in her cave. About Mrs. Chen, who had died in her arms. About the 72 people still sheltering in the high school. About Cade, fighting beside her. And Alpha, who had finally learned to value something beyond strength. She thought about her grandmother, standing in 1897, making the same choice. Vera reached up toward the breach, her Omega gift fully manifested, and she pulled. The world became light and cold in pain. She felt her life force being drawn out, years peeling away like pages from a book. Her hair began to gray at the temples. Fine lines appeared at the corners of her eyes. Her hands, raised toward the breach, showed the first signs of age. But the breach was closing. The dimensional wound was healing, reality reknitting itself, the door slamming shut against the Wetiko that had tried to force their way through. The creatures that had already descended screamed, their forms losing cohesion as the connection to their realm was severed. One by one they dissipated into snow and wind and memory. The iron stakes flared brilliant red, then white, then faded to normal metal. The storm systems overhead began to break apart, the unnatural lock that had held them together dissolving. And Vera collapsed. Cade caught her before she hit the ground, his strong arms cradling her against his chest. Sarah was there immediately, checking her pulse, her breathing. She's alive, pulse is strong. But Sarah held up Vera's hand, showing Cade. Look. Vera's hair was shot through with gray. The lines at her eyes were pronounced. Her hands showed the wear of someone 15 years older. How many years did she give? Sarah checked more carefully, her healer's instincts reading the signs. 10, maybe 12. She's aged from 29 to 40, maybe 42. But she's alive, and the breach is closed. Vera opened her eyes slowly, the world swimming back into focus. Did it work? Cade's laugh was half sob. It worked. The storm is breaking. The Wetiko are gone. You closed the door. You saved us all. Good. She managed a weak smile. Then I want that dinner you promised, though you might need to reconsider courting someone who just aged a decade in 5 minutes. He kissed her forehead gently. I would court you if you were 90. Age is just a number. Courage is forever. They made it down the mountain as the storm finally, truly broke. By the time they reached the high school, the wind had dropped to normal winter levels. The snow had stopped falling. And through breaks in the clouds, actual sunlight appeared for the first time in 4 days. The survivors emerged from the high school like people waking from a nightmare. 72 souls who had weathered the impossible and lived to tell the tale. But the cost was apparent as they took stock. The community center group had lost 6 before evacuating to Vera's cave. Another 12 people had died in their homes, frozen or taken by the Wetiko. Henrik Larson, the Fletcher children, Mrs. Chen, others whose names would be read at the memorial. Out of 400 people in Thornhaven Valley, 382 had survived. Better than 1897, but still so many lost. That night, as the pack gathered in the high school for the first real meal since the crisis began, Elder Gareth Stone called for attention. We have survived what should have killed us all. We survived because one person prepared when the rest of us mocked her. One person warned us when we should have listened. One person sacrificed years of her life to close a door we didn't even know was open. He looked directly at Vera, who sat wrapped in blankets, her newly gray-streaked hair pulled back, her aged hands wrapped around hot tea. Vera Ashford. Oracle. Omega. Hero. This pack owes you a debt we can never fully repay, but we can start by acknowledging our failure and committing to do better. From this day forward, Omegas will have a seat on the council. Pack hierarchy will be based on wisdom as well as strength, and weather preparedness will be taken seriously, with you as the head of our emergency management. The pack erupted in applause. Even Ronan Frost stood and bowed his head in respect. Vera felt tears on her cheeks. Decades of dismissal and mockery finally answered with the recognition she had never sought but always deserved. Cade took her hand, careful of the aged skin, and squeezed gently. 3 months later, spring came to Thornhaven Valley. The snow melted slowly, revealing a landscape transformed. Buildings that had collapsed under the weight. Roads that needed complete reconstruction. But also revealing a community that had been forged in ice and fear and emerged stronger. Vera stood on the porch of her cave dwelling, now expanded to include a proper weather station funded by the pack. Her hair was still gray-streaked, her hands still showed her true age of 40+, but her eyes were bright, and her smile was genuine. Below in the valley, reconstruction was well underway. New building codes that prioritized insulation and backup heating. Emergency supply caches scattered throughout the region, and a new social structure that valued all voices, not just the loudest. Nathan Winters approached, his children in tow. Lucy ran ahead, throwing herself at Vera in an exuberant hug. "Miss Vera, Dad says we can help plant the garden today." Vera laughed, ruffling the girl's hair. "That's right. And this year, we're planting enough to feed the whole valley if we need to. No more depending on just-in-time delivery." Cade's truck rumbled up the mountain road, and Vera felt her Omega instincts react, but differently now. Not with the urge to submit, but with the warmth of genuine connection. He had been courting her properly for 3 months, patient and respectful and utterly smitten. He climbed out carrying supplies, his alpha presence no longer overwhelming but complimentary. "Got the new solar panels. And Elder Gareth wants to know if you'll speak at the memorial dedication next week." "I'll speak." She looked out over the valley. They deserve to be remembered, all of them, the ones who died and the ones who survived. Later, as the sun set and turned the mountain peaks gold, Cade and Vera sat together on her porch. His arm was around her shoulders. Her head rested against his chest. Two people who had found each other not through pack hierarchy, but through genuine respect and shared trauma and the slow building of trust. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly. "The years you gave?" "Every day." She was honest. "I wake up and see gray in my hair that shouldn't be there yet. I feel aches in my joints that a 29-year-old shouldn't feel. I think about the decade I lost and everything I'll never experience at the age I was supposed to experience it." She turned to look at him. "But then I think about Lucy Winters and her brothers, about Nathan getting to watch his children grow up, about 72 people who are alive because I stood my ground, and I realize that some prices are worth paying. That being an oracle means understanding that individual life is less important than community survival. You're remarkable. I'm an Omega. We've always been remarkable. The pack just needed to almost die to notice." From inside the cave, Sarah's voice called out that dinner was ready. The pack that Vera had chosen rather than the pack she was born into. Nathan and his children. Sarah, who had believed from the start. And now Cade, who had learned to see past hierarchy to the person underneath. As they went inside to eat and laugh and share stories, Vera paused at the threshold to look back at the valley one more time. The barometer was reading normal. The weather patterns were seasonal. The mountain was at peace. And somewhere in her grandmother's journals, she knew there was a note about the next convergence. 127 years from now, 2152. Some future oracle would stand where Vera had stood, would face what Vera had faced, would make the same choice she had made. But that was a century away. Tonight there was food and warmth and family. Tonight there was laughter in a cave that had sheltered the desperate and saved the worthy. Tonight, there was an alpha who looked at an omega and saw not a role but a person worth courting. Tonight, the oracle could rest. The watch would continue, but for now, the watch was peaceful. And that was enough. The end.